Hello, protocols, packets, and programs. October is almost here when we get to tell the scariest stories, read the most horrifying code, and try to survive yet another PowerPoint presentation on cybersecurity awareness. Which means this week we chat with Janet Worthington from Forrester Research about the state of application security education and what could be improved. In the news segment, Oracle Cloud Authorization Bypass, a Python path traversal, a Chrome prototype pollution, a PlayStation zombie flaw, why security products fail, and more. Get spooky and stay tuned for Application Security Weekly.
This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals. It's the show to learn the latest tools, techniques, and processes necessary to understand DevOps, application security, and cloud security. Your trusted source for the latest application security news. It's time for Application Security Weekly.
ThreatLocker is a global cybersecurity leader paving the way for businesses everywhere to implement a zero-trust security solution that not only protects business-critical data, but also helps mitigate cyber attacks. ThreatLocker's unique endpoint solutions help you to work smart and strengthen your security infrastructure from the ground up. ThreatLocker's allow listing, ring fencing, storage control, elevation control, and network access control solutions give you a more secure approach to blocking the exploits of unknown application vulnerabilities. If you're looking to enhance your cybersecurity and stop zero-day vulnerabilities exploiting your data, reach out to a ThreatLocker cyber hero today. Visit securityweekly.com/ThreatLocker to learn more. Your organization is building and updating business-critical web applications faster than ever. And with so much pressure to move fast, you may find yourself making trade-offs between innovation and security. Now you can build fast without sacrificing security with Invicti, the application security platform that helps your dev, sec, and ops teams work together to secure every website, web app, and API. With unparalleled accuracy, coverage, and automation, Invicti scales like no other AppSec solution. Discover why many of the world's largest organizations innovate securely with Invicti. Visit securityweekly.com/Invicti. The shift to remote and hybrid work over the past 2 years has accelerated application development on cloud infrastructure. However, securing these new assets has lagged behind. Qualys CloudView, the next generation cloud security posture management, delivers an end-to-end multi-cloud security and compliance solution encompassing the entire application lifecycle from build to runtime. CloudView enables enterprises to assess their cloud security and compliance posture, identify risks and gaps, auto-remediate issues, proactively enforce best practices, and prove compliance in audits rapidly and efficiently. Identify your most vulnerable cloud assets by visiting securityweekly.com/Qualys. This is episode 213, recorded September 26, 2022. I'm your host, Mike Shima, and I'm here with John Kinsella. Hello, Mr. John Kinsella.
It's Monday again. It keeps happening.
It keeps happening. It's like we're trapped in eternal Mondays. It's like a horror movie gone bad. And speaking of horror movies gone bad, we have Tyler Robinson, which I'm not sure exactly what that means other than welcome, Tyler.
Thanks, Mike. I will take it, I think.
That's going to come back to haunt me, I know. We also have one haunting announcement to read. Don't miss any of your favorite Security Weekly content. Visit securityweekly.com/subscribe to subscribe to any of our podcast feeds and have all new episodes downloaded right to your phone. You can also join our mailing list, Discord server, and follow us on social media and our streaming platforms. Janet Worthington is a senior analyst for security and risk at Forrester. Janet covers product security, software supply chain, open source security, and DevSecOps. Janet's background is in product management and application security. Hello, Janet, and thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Mike. I'm looking forward to it.
We're looking forward to this conversation as well. After all, it's fall. Students are returning to classes. And I think everyone is learning how to fix cross-site scripting, SQL injection, and everything else. It's a computer security problem, right? So this might be a short segment. Is this true?
Yes, I mean, that was what we would hope, right?
Oh, dear. Yes.
So maybe not. We actually looked into this here at Forrester. We looked at the top 50 computer science undergraduate programs in the country. And our goal was to see how much security is offered, and especially application security and writing secure code. And the reason we wanted to do this is we put out a survey every year where we ask security decision makers, how are you being breached? And, at least almost 2/3 of companies have experienced at least one breach in the last 12 months. And external attacks, the biggest attribution. And in external attacks, unfortunately, it's applications that top the list. Your typical SQL injection type of bugs and open source dependencies. Mm-hmm. And so this just keeps happening year after year. And so we were thinking, is it, why is this happening? And that's why we started doing the research is, are people being taught this when they're doing computer science, in college? And spoiler, there 0 out of 50 actually require a code security or an application security course. Not to say there aren't electives, but none required.
Yeah, that's crazy. And this is one of those areas, John has mentioned this a lot too, just asking that rhetorical question, where is the education about within the comp sci classes? You did make that distinction there at the end between required versus electives, but even amongst the electives, how many did you see just had security topics or secure coding topics? What did some of the, for those programs that do touch on security, what are some of the, what's it even just touching on there?
Yeah, so when it comes to, most of the 50 offer like general cybersecurity courses. And when we talk about cybersecurity, it could be anything from network security, which I think, a fair number have, right? I mean, I think we've all, in the industry for a long time, everybody's kind of thought about network security, so I'm not surprised about that. There also tends to be a fair number of cryptography courses, which is great, right? Because you need to make sure that, data is being encrypted properly. And I think it's also a fun topic that kind of crosses over with math. And I do think we see a lot of CS and math classes. Yeah, that crossover. We see a fair amount on databases, computer architecture. But when it comes to like secure coding, there are some colleges that offer, specific secure coding courses. About 9 out of the 50 we found did that. And they're electives. A lot of times, though, what's interesting about these electives is some of them you have to you'd be in your 3rd or 4th year to take based on like they're like the 300 or 400 levels. So it's interesting that you kind of have to wait to take them. Now that's not true for all of them, but that's one of the patterns we saw. And certainly there's more at the graduate level, but at the undergraduate level, it's kind of interesting that there aren't more of these courses that you can take sort of as intro classes.
Is that a failure? Is that a failure of the curriculum being updated? Is that a modification of professors just not being kind of up to speed, where we're integrating that secure coding from the very beginning? I mean, obviously they have to learn how to code and a lot of the concepts, but as part of the concepts, you would think that would be an integral part of getting that done right from the start.
Yeah, and I think to your point, I think there's some missed opportunities, right? There's a lot of programming and web development classes that you could potentially sort of layer in some secure coding writing classes as sort of part of it, and then have other, more structured types of classes where you're maybe learning more advanced topics when it comes to application security, like maybe secure design, right? Which would be important. I think there are, again, I don't want to say that there aren't any. There are some out there, colleges that do offer these type of classes. But I think it's hard. There's a lot to cover with computer science, right? And so when you look at some of these curriculums, I mean, I took CS. I'm not going to say what decade that was, but it was a long time ago. But like, what did we learn? We learned programming. We learned data structures, algorithms, theory, a lot of theory. And, those courses are still offered now, but now you have so many exciting courses that, you got machine learning, you've got AI. My daughter's in her 2nd year and she's taking one of these programs, and she's taking algorithms and quantum engineering. So like when you have all of these really cool courses, who's going to be the kid that's like, I would like to elect to take the secure coding class, like not many, right? No, yeah, exactly. Now there are some cool security tracks. Some of these schools like Georgia Tech have security tracks. In that security track, you are likely to potentially, you will probably take a application security course. But if you're not in the tracks, and we're actually seeing more universities go to this kind of track methodology, you may not touch on it at all.
Oh, so is that sort of setting up the idea that security is a specialization as opposed to just a foundational part of comp sci? Meaning, nobody specializes in quicksort and bubble sort, right? But it's just basic algorithms understanding, big O notation. But security isn't the same fundamentals. So it's these threads and tracks that you have to get into if you like security, as it sounds like.
That's what it seems like. It does seem like that. And it's interesting, kind of to your point on that one, Northeastern actually offers a cybersecurity bachelor's of science. Pretty cool, right? And, some of the secure coding topics are included in that, but not in the computer science part, right? So you want, I think it'd be hard to say that we expect developers to be security experts, but I still feel like there's a certain amount of awareness that we could start incorporating at the undergraduate level.
So
I think the fundamental things that would be very valuable is actually a lot of cross-pollination between not just comp sci, but any of the network admin, sysadmin, the things that are traditionally having to operate together. If you don't have a full understanding, at least at a base level, if you could actually work in security from the fundamental side of this is how computers work, this is how networks work, this is how you get your application up to a web server. Here's what a web server actually is, and then fundamentally have those teams work together. The developers would be able to interact with the infrastructure people as well as the infrastructure people seeing some of the problems with the developers. I think that interoperability very early on would save a ton of people having to learn that on the fly, and that's a steep learning curve for oftentimes people that are introverts and or don't like people. They like code or computers better.
Yeah, I know. I think that's a great point. And I think as we look at something like cloud computing and cloud security in particular, developers are now running more of the infrastructure than ever before, right? They may be the ones doing the infrastructure as code templates. They may be the ones writing that. They may be the ones spinning up the containers. Sometimes you still have a lot of large organizations that have specialty groups, like you'll have a DevOps team, et cetera, that is separate from developers. But we are seeing, more and more the developers owning everything from the infrastructure to, writing the code. And I think it's important, to your point, Tyler, to have that sort of like larger perspective that you can kind of step back and kind of see the bigger picture.
I'd love to also reframe that conversation a little bit, that, you're talking about there's grad level classes, 200, 300s for talking around security. And those usually, frequently, not always, but sort of delve into the crypto side of things, which is advanced. But there's a bit of a core fault with the argument that security, you have to be an expert or you have to have like all these bases in place. We're going out and we're expecting our users to be able to understand MFA and, encryption and all these type of things. Yet the people who are developing them, we think that security is not a basic concept, is something that have become an expert in. That seems like there needs to be a little bit of sort of restructuring how we think about that.
Well, you can see the maturity model of a lot of these verticals that we're ending up with, not just, AI, ML. You look at the crypto, the blockchain, a lot of the Web3 development, the NFT space. You see all of these and you start to see the exact same security mistakes that we've made over the last 20 years. And a lot of that is because we've not integrated some of that security fundamentals from the beginning. They're going to make the same mistakes if we're not helping educate that and get them at a better starting point. But again, that comes back to like, how do you actually go about doing that from a practical level? You talk about national education and curriculum, and the schools are barely able to communicate between branches of their own colleges or undergraduate schools, much less across a nation. So fundamentally, getting this right, the oversight and curriculum boards are going to have to be a lot better organized, and or there's going to have to be some better coordination as far as who's leading the charge on that.
Yeah, there's got to be some. That's a great time to bring up incentives too, because industry, of course, is spending tons of money on bug bounties, on tools, on scanners, on all these remediation techniques and steps to fix this insecure code that's coming from new hires, junior programmers, even senior programmers that are making mistakes or aren't necessarily have the grounding. So I'm curious, Janet, have you seen incentives, or are there ways that industry can help these courses partnerships better? Or a lot of it I think is going to come down to money. So does everybody just need more money for this, or is there a different type of incentive here?
Yeah, I think there's like two parts to that. I think the first part is what companies can do to kind of help out at the undergraduate level, and just cybersecurity in general. And I think the second part, and Tyler, I think you touched on it, is what offerings do you have out there while you're actually coding that help you to understand maybe you've made a mistake, right? I mean, I hate to liken it to a spell checker, but when you're writing a document, you get information about your grammar, did you misspell something? There's tools now out there that will plug into your IDE that will tell you things like, hey, this could potentially be a SQL injection. And I think there are tools out there like that. And I think what's important about those tools, and I'll get back to the other part in a second, but I think what's important about those tools is, I don't know about you guys, but I found in college the lectures were good, but it was more the hands-on is how I learned, right? Yeah. I mean, how many people were here in the computer science lab late at night? You're trying to get a program to work, and the bugger goes, and you're like, oh, for heaven's sakes. And then finally you get it, and that's how you learn. And so I think these tools, by kind of slotting in there, they're helping you with that reinforcing message. And the ones that I think are the most advanced are the ones that not only kind of tell you about your code, they can also tell you about the software components that you're downloading, your open source components, your third party. They link to interactive training. So they'll go right from those tools right out to interactive training, where again, you're going back to that hands-on. So I think that's I think I've seen the industry try to say, wait a minute, we can't expect developers to come out as like security experts, right? And we have to know that maybe they're not even getting a baseline in college. So if we start with that, how can we help them?
I think it would be very valuable for a lot of big company vendors to front load some of this investment that they're paying out in bug bounty and security and even breach mitigation. You can calculate and get a quantifiable number around metrics for your return on investment by allowing some of that product offering for maybe a low cost or no cost to the colleges. So one, they get familiar with the products out in the industry, leveraging those to bring them on board for job placement, which makes the college also look good, makes the company look good, and it gets their brand awareness out there. But you're also getting some of that secure coding built out right from the box and getting them comfortable with those software packages that you're speaking of, so that these students have an understanding of what they're going to be expected on the job, how to do good secure coding, and they're learning as they go. I think all of this can be front loaded by a lot of the industry where they're spending money on the back end. They can just move that to the front and get some education out there.
Yeah, and to your point, we're actually seeing some of that, right? So, to call out Tufts University, surprisingly, they're not on the top 50 list. I was kind of surprised about that for computer science. A professor named Ming Chow, who's very well known in the security industry, he teaches a couple courses on computer security and secure coding. And in his intro to a computer security class, he actually has, 1 week you learn about, cross-site scripting and SQL injection. And then the next week you learn how to use the tools that might help you find things, like some of the open source ones that are. There's plenty of open source, the Burp suites out there, you have Zap, you have a ton of these free tools, and just like we had for the network side, right? We have Wireshark and Map. So like he's getting the students not only to learn about it, but also to, like you said, Tyler, kind of practice with these tools. And as an organization, what can you do, to your point, Tyler, if you're a security company, you not only have tools that you could potentially donate to these schools, but you also have brains, right? You can have your folks maybe partner with the college, to help, broaden some of these offerings. as well as, when you offering internships, right? And again, that's like that hands-on point of aspect. But if you are doing an internship in computer, bring somebody on for software development, help them learn some of these tools while they're doing their internship. And then you can also, one thing that I think is really cool is companies that sponsor capture the flag events. So, because it gets, that little bit of a competitive spirit going, and you can, you're trying to actively find the bad things, right? And, I think Veracode does a great job of this. They actually have their own gaming software. It's sort of like a gamed version of learning software security that they have like a 2-week offering on that. And they give away real prizes. Right? To go back to incentives. I mean, you as these colleges that compete can win real money. So absolutely, I think, there's a lot that your companies can do to support the industry so that students are learning even before they go into the job market.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned the little red squiggle in the IDE that says this is the secure coding feedback that a la grammar. But you're also there at the end describing like CTFs, hackathons, or hacking examples. And, we may be creating a whole bunch more Tylers, which I don't think Tyler will object to. We definitely need some more people breaking software. But I'm curious, of the courses that you looked at, was there this bias towards the breaking software because those are the fun hands-on labs? There's a pedagogical aspect to just, I want to break this, tear it down, burn it down. Everyone can see Tyler smiling as I'm describing this, versus the maybe the secure design. And this is what service to service authentication looks like. The things that secure protocol design that I'm possibly underselling them. I do think those could be fun, but I'm just curious if you saw a distinction in the focus of the type of security that that's being presented.
Yeah, I think it tends, to your point, to be a little bit more on the offensive side in certain areas. But I do think that, a lot of this security can be weaved into with network security, right? Like you'll have both. You'll have to learn the offensive part as well as the defensive part. But I think that just naturally, with things like hackathons and, something like a capture the flag, I think the nice thing about something like that is you not only do to find the issue, you have to fix it. So I think it's a little bit harder to, maybe get people interested necessarily in the secure coding part of it, but I think it's definitely doable. And there's, definitely colleges out there that are doing it. I think Harvard kind of has an intro course. It's not required that, you can learn about basic principles of, application security along with a number of other items where you're kind of getting exposed to it.
I think that's one thing that we do need to change as an industry, right? That dichotomy of almost the varsity players, the football players, like that aspect of what's glamorous versus what's not. Like we don't need all these breakers. Yes, it is a little bit of fun. Like I'm not gonna lie. On the other side of that, like we need a lot of people building stuff, and to build something securely, make it work, and have it like function doing high level and very secure operations, like that should be just as rewarding. And I think if we took away some of the mindset and the stigma around the glamorous side of hacking and the darker side of things, like inherently there's always going to be that draw to the riskier side of things for certain people. But a lot of that is a stigma that the mindset just needs to change, and we need to adopt that and make heroes out of the good guys and the people not well recognized, rather than the one or two off, varsity football players that are, make that one throw and it's cool. Like all of the things that it took to get up to that point, like let's make that cool for everybody else as well.
Security jokes.
No, I think that's great. And I wonder then, what would be to lean into that a bit more? What would create that ideal AppSec course instead of just the focus on CTF? What would be some of those areas either that already exist that you've seen, Janet, or I'm curious if John and Tyler, if there's a particular topic or angle that this would be part of that intro to AppSec?
Yeah, I think I kind of go back to, first just awareness, general cybersecurity awareness. I think that's important as a part of any of this. But then kind of diving more into some of the more common OWASP issues that we're seeing. And so, unfortunately, injection attacks, even in today, we're still seeing a fair amount of those. And why are those a problem? And then when you get into, I just did some research on serverless security, and injection and bombs is one of the biggest things, because now you're getting different payloads from different places as a serverless function. And so, there's not just one place that you have to, it's not just your SQL code that you have to worry about. So I think kind of giving folks an awareness of like why these things are a problem. What can possibly happen? What are some of the common flaws that we saw out there, and how are they actively being used is, I think, important. And I would say you can't not think about open source, right? I mean, everybody uses open source tools. Everybody uses open source libraries and dependencies. You have to know that before you download something, you've got to understand what you're downloading. So I think sort of those sort of basics, I think, is just a great place to start. And then also trying to use some of the tools that can help you.
I think part of the trick is going to be, and I'll use my word, but how do you make that sexy? And put another adjective in there, I don't care. But how do you make that something that people want to do, right? The stuff that Tyler was talking about, like everyone likes the quarterback, right? Like there's a reason he's like lifted up on people's shoulders and on the front page of the news. How do we make the rest of, as you were saying at the beginning, the security nerd who's going to take the elective class, how do you make that elective class something that people want to take, right? No examples off the top of my head, but I remember classes in college, like an elective, everyone would be like, I want to take that class. It looks super cool. How do we make security like that? And I think part of that is getting rid of some of the basics, like it's more, we talk on here a lot about like, secure by default and things like that. Like, let's actually fix some of these basic issues, memory management and things like that, memory related issues. And then somehow we need to figure out a way to highlight some of the others that, like, okay, yes, there's parts of being a surgeon that's like absolutely horrible and nobody wants to do, but still you get to like go and do cool things in people's brains and like save their life. So like what's the equivalent of that in computer science, computer security?
I think it would be really cool to see, starting from the opposite side of this, like let's show some really good coding, some really secure apps, how intricate designs can actually get, so that you're looking at what good fundamentals actually are, and what a really cool app that is securing something crazy, like this is securing $500 billion of crypto asset, or this is doing, high-speed multi-transaction on a known exchange platform, like doing really cool things and showing the product of something well-built, I think is a interesting side. So people want to build something, and they have that kind of competition or competitive side of, I want my apps to all be this secure. I want to think and design everything from that security standpoint, because they have a good reference point. I think a lot of people just don't have a great reference point to start with, because they're just trying to learn how to do this, and what they're provided for reference is usually pretty horrible.
That's an interesting point, because to my mind, two things that come are WebAssembly. Like, how do you do sandboxing in WebAssembly? It's definitely can be a bit tough, maybe for intro level programming, but maybe I'm also being a bit pessimistic.
How do you do WebAssembly?
Right, but there are good, interesting design choices there, in the sense of where, memory management, restricted access to file system networking. There's some good concepts there. And then browsers, of course, are the modern operating system, if you will. So just to study a browser design would be, that would take years and years, but maybe it's just something like message passing. One of the things that we haven't touched on at all, which I'm a little bit surprised of, so I'll just broach it right here, is the languages that have been studied. It doesn't sound like there's been either a pro or con that everyone's decided to stop teaching C and C++ or Pascal or Fortran for that matter, and they moved into Go or Rust or Java or Python. Has the language made any impact or a difference in types, in the sense of how we're teaching or where the security comes from? And I'm curious, Janet, if you've just seen that as one of the dimensions of just whether comp sci in general or the secure coding courses more specifically.
Yeah, well, what's interesting is I think Python is just a very popular language now, and I think it's popular with data science as well. So, that we talk about computer science too, but there's these offshoots that we're seeing, and a lot of data science programs rely on Python, and Python's neither better or worse than any other language when it comes to security for the most part. But a lot of the libraries that Python depends on, there are a lot of open source, that you can grab and use to make your programs. Those tend to have, based on some of the reports that we're seeing, they can have a fair number of known vulnerabilities in them. So I think the professors are trying to get with the times and stay up to date. I didn't see any on Go, but I didn't necessarily look specifically for that language. But I do think there are some tools and some languages that probably are better, like Rust potentially. But my understanding is I've never coded in it, but my understanding is it's pretty complicated to code in. So, what you're trying to do is, I think one of the biggest, and I'd be interested in what you guys think of this, from what I've seen, is one of the biggest problems with security is we make it so hard to understand, right? Like, we talk in a way that I think makes it seem like it's very complicated. And I think we kind of need to switch how we talk about it and talk about it more from the developer perspective. And I think kind of goes back, John, to your point about how do we make it something that's more accessible to people and developers? Well, maybe using their language a little bit more. And, maybe some of these security stuff that we talk about, maybe just kind of peppering them in while you're doing programming languages, while you're doing it, whatever it is you're doing, sort of having some of those tools in place to kind of maybe help you identify stuff, or maybe just kind of having part of the course, just talk about that a little bit. But I do feel like, we've kind of made security a little bit inaccessible, and I'd love to see it be more accessible to everyone. And I think that starts by, to your point, Tyler, not necessarily saying, oh, the person who broke it is the super smartest, right? Because it only takes one goal, right? But you could be saving hundreds and hundreds of goals, right? But, nobody goes and talks about that. So I do think there's a way we kind of need to flip it. And that is kind of why I'm glad to see that the AppSec industry has tried at least to kind of move more towards the developers, help while you're writing code, help you understand while you're pulling down that open source library, what's going on, and then kind of give you information while you're in the moment to help you fix it. So, I'm not sure if there's a language per se that people should be using over others. I think it's more of just an awareness.
I think that awareness around good security inside of languages should be one of the considerations that is brought to people trying to learn languages. I think that's one of the missing parts. Everyone just wants to learn, either what's taught, what they've seen, or what's interesting at the time. Call it Go, call it Rust. Python's always in there. Is there a good reason? Is there other languages that you should be looking at where you're leveraging some of the security implications, or some of not even the security side, but the feature sets and security-minded things like libraries, validating, different libraries being deployed. This is going to become an issue in the near future. With the federal government moving to having to validate all of these different applications and libraries being deployed and hardware being deployed, all these things are going to eventually become something that students have to think about. And if they're not prepared for that, or they've went down, the rabbit hole of a language that may or may not support some of that, that can actually have pretty big implications for them later on down the road.
Yeah, and this is where I'd like to make my pitch for, I love the network security aspects and protocols, and even just the idea, look at HTTP 1 versus HTTP 2 versus HTTP 3, and just the sense of HTTP 1 has a lot of ambiguity in the spec. So how do you program to that ambiguity? HTTP 3 is on top of UDP. So suddenly it's unreliable, but not in modern networks. And it has framing, has a lot of interesting topics that you could bring up in terms of ordering data, overlapping data, handling frames, memory offsets. So I think you could say, go implement this in the language of your choice and understand a lot of those, where are security boundaries and where they are not as well. And in terms of, nope, no authentication here, no authorization here, just a framing, just some data getting passed around.
that cross training to the network and other aspects of how the implications of what protocol and language you use, that becomes super important, and again often not cross taught. So
Yes. So Janet, looking forward, you looked at the top 50. We talked a lot about the U.S. I think colleges right now. Is there any hope? Do we have is number 51, 52? You mentioned actually a couple that weren't in the top 50 that have good programs. So are there things that we could be looking towards as an industry to say here is a program that's doing pretty well, or this is a good area to emulate or build off of or invest more in?
Well, I think cybersecurity in general, right? Like, I mean, I think, I talk a lot about application security and secure coding, but I think we just need to do more with cybersecurity. And Tyler, to your point, the executive order definitely highlighted that. And I think the colleges are trying to do that. I think, John, you brought this up. It shouldn't be something that's like, you're either a security expert and computer science or you're not, right? It should be something that's woven into the different classes. And like a shout out to the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign, they actually have a scholarship for cybersecurity. But again, it's something obviously you have to apply for and opt into. But I think the more we can talk about cybersecurity, the more we can sort of raise awareness. And then when you get into the industry, I think it is up to the organizations to do more, right? I mean, you can't expect everybody to come in with a certain level. You have to make sure you're using the tools. And one thing that I love about Netflix, and it kind of goes a little bit to Tyler, what you were saying, is they have this idea of paved roads, right? What are the libraries I should be using? Give me the secure tools to do the authentication and authorization. Why, as a developer, do I have to go out and figure out which one's the best one to use, right? I'm not spending all day on that, right? The security folks are. So I do think the organizations, when it comes to things like application security, have things that they can do to put more thought to make it, that security by design means that you have to give people the tools early on, and it's, in what they're working with, right? They shouldn't have to go to a different tool set. Everything should kind of be there for them. And that's how I think we need to flip the script just in general, is kind of going back to that developer methodology. We need to think about empathy for the developer and coming from that point of view. So in general, I think we are seeing more schools do cybersecurity, which is exciting. We actually are seeing more industry care about cybersecurity. Microsoft actually launched a national campaign with community colleges, which is exciting, to recruit a cybersecurity workforce. They're going to try and help sort of close that gap on the 250,000, shortage we have in security jobs in the United States. Now, they're not all going to end up working for Microsoft, but Microsoft is going to be trying to help pair with that community. So I think, that's a great way. And then I'd be remiss, Mike, and I don't know if this is my time to talk about it, but I'm an analyst. All we do is talk. We are seeing, I want to talk about accessibility and security when it comes to women and underrepresented groups. When I got into security, I was super intimidated. And this is working with, I had been working with developers and architects all along, which can be, in software can be kind of, a little intimidating in itself. But there's something different about security. We kind of, notch it up a level when it comes to inaccessibility, I feel like. And there are programs like Women in Security and Privacy Group that are trying to make this more accessible. And there's one called She's Security. It's just one day after a CS boot camp, you go and, you're running Burp Suite just to see what it's like. We have to break down this thing, as Tyler, that you're talking about, is like, it doesn't have to be the quarterback, right? They shouldn't, it's the whole team that we need to think about. And so I think more companies need to be doing more with these groups, with women in security and privacy. And Forrester's trying to help as well. We're trying to put the money where your mouth is. I don't know what the right term is. But we are running a security and risk forum down in DC, November 7th through the 8th. And we're trying to give away a couple scholarships, probably to local folks in the area who are underrepresented, to come to these forums, to learn about these different security tracks. I mean, there are going to be, some really cool ones. Mine's on this is exciting. Wait for it. This software security supply chain essentials. Okay, maybe not as exciting as I thought it was going to be when I said it out loud.
We'll throw in some,
but there are a lot
yeah.
of other cool ones. Let me tell you, there'll be other cooler ones there. But I think we all need to do that. I think we all need to just kind of reach out, and whether you're donating your time, you're donating money, you're donating just awareness that we don't have a lot of women in security, and it's a tough landscape. And underrepresented groups. Sorry, not just women, but so I think there's more to do there, just in general. And I think that starts at the undergraduate level. You know, we don't see a ton of women necessarily in a lot of certain schools better than others. I think Tufts has 50-50 CS men to women. Wellesley, where I went to school, all women. Economics used to be the number one major. Now it's computer science. Yay, us. But you shouldn't have to go to an all women's college to feel like you can contribute. So in general, I think we need to talk more about computer science with women and cybersecurity as well.
No, yeah, thank you for that. And we've got links to that, wisp.org.com in the show notes. And we can also, you mentioned the Day of Security. There's also Girls Who Code, Black Girls Code, a lot of organizations that can use support, as well as, I think, just to reiterate, that getting away from the stigma that the coolest and the best are the Tylers out there. Sorry to pick on you again, Tyler. But doing the breaking, there's a lot of specialization. Clearly in, you mentioned, Janet, serverless. There's also, we could broaden that to cloud, we could talk about, there's a whole pillar of containerization, there's Kubernetes, there's this whole cryptography angle where we could talk about the ancient protocols of Kerberos versus more modern areas of identity and zero proofs. And all of these belong into the under that umbrella of security, and not to mention, the least of which is like the chaos monkey, security monkey that's coming out of Netflix, those paved roads. So a lot of fun things to work on. So yes, thank you so much for highlighting that. And I guess, that was, I think, perhaps your final pitch there, but definitely, rather than filibuster at the end, let me give you the final word here, Janet. Any other parting thoughts or calls to action for our audience?
Well, I just want to thank you guys for having me on. I do listen to your talk every week, and so it's great to be on here. And yeah, I would just think that, organizations, there's a lot organizations can do with universities and with undergraduate students to help them, whether it's internships, capture the flag events, et cetera. But also, once you have folks in the working world, you still have to give them that reinforced learning. And that comes with, tools and, more interactive, fun training than the e-learning PowerPoint slides that we're all so afraid of.
Yes, indeed. Yes, well, thank you very much, Janet. And for anyone who's going to be in DC around November, give her a thanks in person, and definitely do attend some software supply chain essentials. The titles may not be the coolest thing in the world, but the topics are. So yes, thank you, Janet. Thanks, John and Tyler, for joining us as well. Thanks, everyone, for listening. We're going to take a quick break and then return with news of the week.